All right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Hudson Chamber Legislative Update for Tuesday, May 5th. My name is Mary Claire Olson-Potter, President of the Chamber, and we are thrilled today to have Representative Shannon Zimmerman joining us this morning. So what I thought we'd do is just quickly go around the room. As always at all chamber events, as I said, we would be eating some fabulous breakfast, drinking coffee, and networking. So we wanted to provide that opportunity this morning too. So because I know that you are all different on your screens than what I see you here, it's kind of like the Brady Bunch family. I am going to go across my screen and just ask you to introduce yourself and the company and the organization that you're with. And Representative Zimmerman, I will come back to you last. So I am going to start with my screen, and that is Dr. Nicolette.
Nicolette, Hudson School District.
Very good. And next to Larry, Pastor Larry.
Yeah, Larry Ziman, Faith Community Church.
All right. Jolene?
Jolene Sullivan, Tammy Blue, American Family.
Very good. And Council Member DeZiel?
Yep, Hudson City Council, District 3.
Good morning. Welcome, Peg Gagnon.
Hi, I'm Peg Gagnon, Bridge for Community Life.
Thank you. Father John.
Father John Garrett, St. Patrick Parish and School.
Great. Linda.
Linda Lukoski-Eng with Minuteman Press.
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Brian Elwood with Excel Energy.
Thank you. Heather.
Good morning, Heather Loughlin with the St. Croix Valley Foundation.
April.
Hi, April Worthington with the Hudson Chamber.
Great. Emily.
Good morning, Emily Sumner with the Chamber.
And now we see Jesse. Thank you.
Jesse Stickler with Bridge for Community Life.
Great. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Leanne Van Allen with the University of Wisconsin River Falls.
All right. Steve?
This is Steve Leach with the Leach McSorley Agency in Hudson and Leach Agency in River Falls.
Great. Good morning. And we have Nate from the River Channel. Aaron?
Yep, Aaron Reeves with the City of Hudson.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Angie.
Gosh, good morning, Angie Brown with Telus Properties.
Great, good morning. This is a guessing game. I have a 7812722.
That's Mark McNamee with McNamee Real Estate Team at Keller Williams.
I'm so sorry, Mark, that I don't have that number memorized. My apologies.
That's all right.
Okay, we're waiting for your camera. All right.
Me too.
Good morning. We have Angel Zimmerman.
Good morning, Angel Zimmerman with Bella Vines Winery.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Amy? Amy Berg?
Hi, Amy Berg with Turning Point for Victims of Domestic and Sexual Violence.
Great. Thank you for being here. Good morning, Tim? Tom? Okay. All right. Tom, is that you, Mayor?
Yep, that's me. Good morning, everybody.
And you're with?
Coca-Cola.
Very good. Thank you. And then we have another guest with a phone number ending in 0696.
Yeah, that's Virginia Ballantyne with Bridge for Community Life. I don't have a webcam, so I'm listed there twice, I think.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, very good. Did I miss anyone? All right. How's everyone doing on this Cinco de Mayo day? Right?
Mary Claire?
Yes.
This is Beth Schomer from UW River Falls calling in.
Oh, Beth, thank you so much. I'm sorry. I did not mean to miss you.
That's quite all right. Thanks.
I am still learning the Zoom. I've learned a lot already this morning from my cohorts on the phone, so I appreciate you bearing with me on that. And then we have Evie from the Hudson Hot Air Fair joining us. All right, so as I said, we are pleased to welcome. It's very important during this time to stay in touch with our elected leaders and the work that they are doing on COVID-19 for us at the state level. I know they've been working hard and trying to get businesses back to work and so forth, so we will let the representative talk about that, but just briefly just let you know that Representative Shannon Zimmerman, he is married with 2 children. He attended Augusta High School, Chippewa Valley Technical College, and the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. He is a former and CEO of a language translation company. He is a small business owner. He coached youth football for 7 years. He currently serves on the University of Wisconsin River Falls Foundation Board and the University of Wisconsin River Falls Chancellor Advisory Committee. And he's also a member of Rotary. And he's also a former member of the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, and he has been elected to the Assembly since 2016. So at this time, we will welcome Representative Zimmerman to address the group, and we will save plenty of time for question and answers, but please join me in welcoming Representative Zimmerman. See, we all clap now. We all clap. Very good, very good.
Well, listen, Mary, thank you. Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Everyone good? Okay.
Good, good. Okay. Well, it's great to see so many familiar faces. Many of you haven't seen in quite a while. I know that's frustrating, certainly for me. Certainly it's frustrating for all of you as well. I'd like to begin by just thanking you for all that you do for your community from a business perspective, but it's beyond just business. It's moments like this, I feel like, that really kind of define who we are and you know, reflect the greatness that is really the St. Croix Valley. So I just want to say thanks for joining today, and I appreciate it. So here's my objective for today, and we can be a bit fluid, and this can go in whatever direction you want. But as I thought about what may matter most to each of you, my intention today is to, number one, provide information with all of the business members and chamber members as to, you know, what the statistics are, what the what's happening from a process standpoint in the state of Wisconsin. I'll be candid with what I think the outlook and what I think may occur. I'm happy to do that as well. I will also be providing all of the members today resources, access to resources of information that may range from, you know, the current COVID-19 statistics for the state of Wisconsin and how they're trending, to economic toolkits and resources that may be available for you and your business and or your employees and so forth. And then third and finally, and maybe the most important thing, is I just want to hear from you. I'll tell you on the start of this call that, you know, on a normal day in my office in Madison, we probably get 30 to 40 contacts. Of late, and in particular when the extension to the order, the stay-at-home order, was announced, we've now gone to probably 100 to 150 contacts a day. While there's certainly you know, delineation in terms of, you know, whether they're for or against, I just want to say this: whether you are ready to open, fully open right now, and that's okay with you, or whether you are fearful and maybe concerned about the health of those in our community, yourself, your family, and so forth, both of you are not wrong. Everyone is entitled to their perspective right now. And I think that that's too often lost. And I've done a fair bit of staying away from social media because people are chastised regardless of what camp you're in. So I want to start with that. So first of all, let me move into some of the stats that may be relevant. And these are as of 5 p.m. yesterday, but they're certainly pertinent to what we're covering here today. We have in the state of Wisconsin right now just over 8,236 cases, confirmed cases of COVID-19 since the start of this situation. Of that, 340 deaths related to COVID-19. And we're seeing over the past probably 7-day trend, we're seeing a decline in both cases and in certainly the death rates. Currently in the state of Wisconsin, there are 348 people hospitalized across the state. But now to regionalize that for a second, because it's relevant, I think, to what a lot of you may care about, and it's relevant to some of the ways I think about COVID right now and how we can and should be maybe approaching this in the state. In the northwest region of Wisconsin, which essentially would include, if you draw a line, which includes Eau Claire, the city of Eau Claire, which is obviously a larger population, goes straight north and essentially straight west to the St. Croix, 14 counties. Currently, we have 7 patients who are in the hospital in 26 hospitals in that region. So by comparison to the concentration that we see in Milwaukee, we have substantially fewer cases. Probably not surprising, right? The population is obviously a lot more sparse in our region. And again, I'm not saying these things to take a position just yet. I'm sharing them. These are just the facts. Some other things that we hear a lot about. We intended when we started down this path to flatten the curve. Why do we do that? Well, as many of you I'm sure know, we do that so that it allows our healthcare providers time to prepare, time to obtain the inventory and the supplies that we need, and so forth. So just to give you a few stats here, right now, in terms of available ventilators, and I'm going to focus just for a moment on the Northwest region, we have 6 times the number of available ventilators based on current demand. So that's a good thing. If we end up in a situation where we see a spike of any kind, you can be assured that we do have, in fact, the equipment to help address that. We hear a lot about testing, and there's kind of 2 schools on the testing, right? So first of all, the state of Wisconsin, and this number is increasing every single day. In the state of Wisconsin right now, we have the ability to test daily in excess of 10,000 people. We have demand for approximately 1/3 of our capabilities. Now, some of that may be regionalized. Maybe a hospital in Hudson may not have the supply that they do in Dane County or Milwaukee, but this is kind of a statewide number. The point that I want to just make here for a moment is that our initial objective of flattening the curve has materially resulted in success, right? We've gotten ourselves ready. It may not be perfect, and there may be increased demand, certainly in certain areas, but we've done a good job, and I know it's been difficult for all of us as we've done this. And I saw my wife is actually on today. That's good. She's probably wanting an update. Our business, just to kind of relate to all of you, our family winery, we're non-essential. We are shut down, and I understand the pain involved in that because May would be the time of year we had an array of events scheduled that are all canceled. They're canceling into June. I don't even know what summer will look like for us yet. So I only share that because I'm in the foxhole with you, and together we'll find our way out of this. But I wanted just to mention that. Okay, so statistics aside, what's going on in the state right now? First of all, I at the risk of probably being a little too direct here, I'm probably the least political person in Madison because I just never will do that. There's a bit of theater. Doesn't matter what side you're on. There's always going to be a bit of theater. This, to me, is a time for us to thoughtfully take care, number one, protect our state residents. Number two, to also make sure that we don't unintentionally or inadvertently create new victims of COVID-19. Businesses, families who are looking, to make this month's rent payment or mortgage payment. Our kids have been out of school for quite some time, and as it looks right now, they're not going to be back in school till the fall, which is, I know, very tough not only on the kids, it's tough on our educators, it's tough on our families. I would also like to shout out, since we've got some folks from UWRF and we've got Superintendent Ouellette on the phone. Kudos to our schools in terms of how they have quickly adapted themselves, and I think, I hate to make lemonade out of this lemon. But I think we'll be forever changed in certain ways that allow us now new capabilities for online learning and all those sort of things. So I'm grateful to see what we're seeing there. So many of you may be aware, in fact, in 1 hour and 40 minutes, the Wisconsin Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on a lawsuit that was filed on behalf of the legislature on Governor Evers. And I want to explain what it really means, what it really is attempting to do, and how it can impact or affect you. So one of the most frustrating things to me in this process, having grown a business in St. Croix counties, we started that business 25 years ago. And, in business, and I'm sure all of you have to work with your colleagues through the difficult times. And for reasons that seem to escape me, we've had a little bit of difficulty, I think, with certain leadership positions in the state coming together. So the lawsuit that was filed is not meant to be some partisan, we're going to drop a bomb on you. The facts are that the leaders in the state have not come to the table. To me, that just isn't acceptable. We must get in a room, come to the table, and thoughtfully determine how do we protect our high-risk individuals, how do we protect our businesses that are the identity of our communities, right? So we have to have this, this gradual, maybe regional approach. I'll get into more of that here later. But I am very pleased. So as of yesterday afternoon, the governor has agreed and did in fact meet with the Speaker of the Assembly and the Senate Majority Leaders, Senator Fitzgerald. By way of press releases, all I've heard at this moment in time is that all parties felt this was a good initial step. And the discussion centered around not only protection of our neighbors, but also how can we start to open up some of our businesses in the regional plan. States like Michigan, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Ohio are all implementing now these regional plans, which have been thoughtfully done. And I think it's something that Wisconsin absolutely can and should be looking at as well. So as of yesterday, they have met. I'm certain today and tomorrow we're going to learn more about that. But if the Supreme Court says, yep, you're successful in your claim, what it would mean is this. It would force the governor and by direction to the Department of Health to come to the table and develop a plan in cooperation with the legislature. Under our Constitution, when the governor declared a state of emergency, I, as your representative, along with a number of my colleagues, both in the House and in the Senate, we are spectators as well. We don't really have any authority and or power. So this would allow us to start to work together, which I'm very optimistic that we would make some progress there. During this time, we did hold session, and there was a package of bills that were submitted and passed. I'm not going to go into all the details. I'll hit the highlights here. But the good news is you talk about bipartisan cooperation. They passed 97-2 in the House, and the governor signed them into law the next day. These measures range from income tax filing extensions to align to the federal government changes, strengthening and adjusting some regulatory requirements and licensing requirements around the healthcare worker pipeline. We needed to make sure that even if you were a retired physician, but we needed you, that we wouldn't have barriers to your ability to come help residents in the state of Wisconsin. A variety of focus measures out of WEDC, focusing on tourism, manufacturing, ag, retail. There's a host of monies and allocations there. We eliminated the 1-week waiting period for unemployment insurance. So a variety of things. And by the way, I don't expect people to take all the notes. I intend to send links to Mary at the end of this call so that she can distribute them to all the members of Hudson. These are going to be helpful not only in terms of what I'm sharing today, but on an ongoing basis, they'll be very helpful to each of you. We have not gotten official word from our Treasury or the Nonpartisan Fiscal Bureau, but we know that as of the last cash balances between the months of March and April, we have seen a fairly material decline in our balance in our checkbook. Wisconsin coming into this, this is the business guy and me coming out. We, yourselves included, we have done an exceptional job of managing our checkbook in the state of Wisconsin. So we were in as good a position as we probably could have been, but we now have taken that hit. The governor's office estimates, we don't know just yet, but we'll find out soon, that this has probably cost Wisconsin $2 billion to date. And the sad part is a lot of that is coming from local businesses like, many of you. So what I see happening right now is following. I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful that we can get to the table here in the next week. Couple things. So having no official plan, necessarily developed in cooperation with the legislature and the governor's office, there have been some organizations that have been working, I think, very effectively on all of our collective behalves. Hudson Chamber of Commerce, I know, was a signer on a letter that went to the governor's office. You, along with an array of Wisconsin businesses and other organizations, appealing to the governor's office to consider the WMC back to business proposal. I'm not going to ask if everybody's read it. I'm going to send the link at the close of this so that you have access to this. But it's a pretty thoughtful plan. I'm going to go on record and say, look, I think it's time we start to open. I think we can do this in a very thoughtful way. I have contacted every single physician that I have a relationship with across St. Croix County and Pierce County. I have talked to hospital administrators across our district. And I'll ask each one of them, like, hey, it's just you and me on the phone. Tell me about this COVID-19 thing. What do you really think is going on here? And there is a consistent answer that I hear, and it may be delivered differently, but it goes something like this. COVID-19 is a real issue. It is a real issue for those in a very specific or with a very specific profile. Maybe they're elderly, their immune system, their respiratory system is compromised in some way. It's a real thing. And please do not mistake my approach here as being dismissive there. We absolutely have to care for these people. But they would go on to tell me, most often I would hear the following: Shannon, 8 in 10 people who will get the virus will never even know they had it. Of the next 20%, or 2 in 10, some may feel a little bit of a congestion in the chest, maybe a dry cough, and there's a very, very small subset that will require some level of medical care. When I take these things into consideration, when I then overlay, and this is just kind of the way I thought about it, population densities, when I took into consideration the supply chain of the healthcare environment, these are all relevant data points that we should be considering. And so when WMC came out with their plan, they presented it to the governor's office first, right? 3 days later, they presented it by teleconference to the legislature, and I think they've done a pretty good job. And I'm just going to hit a couple highlights because I think that it's very important. Essentially, what we would do is this: this would be administered by DHS, and you would go online, you'd enter in your NAICS code. This tells us what kind of business you are, of course, the county that you operate in, so your geographic location, and then the following conditions are calculated, right? The system would be pre-configured to understand the current infection levels within your region, population densities, the interactive concentration, right? And healthcare capacity. So it takes all of these things and then it categorizes your business. Do you have minimal risk? Do you have moderate risk? Or do you have substantial risk? Based on that distinction, and this can be appealed, of course, if you disagree with it for some reason, you would have a certain set of guidelines that you would follow, but you would be permitted to open. It seems very thoughtful. I like the data-driven approach. It is living, right? If we see changes in the data, these things can move. But it aligns to kind of a philosophy that I'm starting to gravitate substantially towards, which is we can't just take a blanket approach across the state of Wisconsin. We're going to cut our nose off to save our face. There are regions, for example, in Milwaukee County, there's no doubt we have to be very mindful and thoughtful. And by the way, a lot of those affected are in that high-risk category. But in St. Croix County, I think we have some more latitude in terms of what we do there. So I'm going to send that link later on today because I think it's something that would be helpful to each and every one of you. So my expectation in terms of the road ahead and what I think you can count on. My hope is we're again brought to the table here, and I can punch back in, if you will, in Madison and get to work. This is a time for thoughtful leadership. This is not a time for shaking fingers at one another. And if someone doesn't agree with you, so what? They're entitled to that right. But if for those who also, some would say, some would argue, believe in the constitutionality of some of the things going on, it's important to them as well. We have to be mindful of those things. For example, as of yesterday, another lawsuit was filed against the governor's office based on the stay-at-home that focused centered around religious freedoms. Because in certain cases, you can go to stores and there's no restriction on the number of people, but you can't go worship because you've got restrictions on the number of people. I get it. That's a very valid claim that is being made. So there's all these unique complexities that are starting to affect this year. So, Mary Claire, I think I'm going to pause because I've been going for a bit here and I've covered a lot of ground, but I want to open it up also to all the members here, excuse me, to ask some questions.
Great. Very good. Thank you. So I am new to this question thing. So if you have a question, if you'd like to raise your hand, that would be great. That would be okay. Thank you. Heather.
Hey, thanks so much, Representative Zimmerman. I am curious. I'm guessing one of the things that's a challenge for you in our part of the state, and I hear what you're saying about we are not Milwaukee, but is the fact that we're in Wisconsin and yet we are actually much more closely related with the Twin Cities than we are with most of Milwaukee. So how does that play into your thinking as a representative of this area when it comes to what's happening in two states? And in my mind, the one that I pay more attention to is actually the Twin Cities, because that's where our folks commute to once we get back to work.
Yeah, Heather, that is good to see you, by the way. That is a great question. And it actually reminds me of all the times in the legislature that I'm referred to as the representative from Minnesota, because I am the westernmost representative. And you're right, we're a suburb of the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan. It is my understanding that the model, the formula that would be used, for example, for Hudson, Wisconsin, would take into consideration population density and geographic proximity. If it doesn't, we're sure going to make sure that that modification gets made, because that's a very relevant point. So there again, I think that we can watch very carefully what's happening across the river. And if we're seeing infection rates or surges there, then the model might need to be modified just a little bit. So very good question.
All right. Anyone else have a question? Thank you. Larry.
Could you clarify again what this Northwest region is from your perspective?
In fact, I'm gonna verbalize the web address right now, but Larry, you're gonna get this in the links that I send. Minnesota, by comparison, I'm not trying to we're gonna do the grass is greener back and forth across the state lines here, but Minnesota has done a pretty good job of transparently sharing a lot of their statistics. The greatest resource that I have found in Wisconsin right now is WHA.org. It's the Wisconsin Hospital Association. And what the Hospital Association has done is they have 133 participating hospitals across the state of Wisconsin. Each one provides daily information on number of new cases, 1 day, 7 day trends. I mean, supplies. It's actually a fantastic resource. And so within that site, you can further select it. So the Northwest region, and it's 14 counties. It's going to be Pierce, St. Croix, Dunn, Eau Claire, Chippewa. We're going to move north into Polk, Burnett, and just kind of work our way to the Superior area there. So you can filter by region. Naturally, you're going to, the map is color coded by county, so you can quickly see where are the hot spots, if there are such a thing in the state of Wisconsin right now. But WHA.org is kind of the resource that I go to, well, every morning, actually.
All right, very good.
Other questions?
I don't know that I can see everyone, but yeah. It's a quiet group today. Yes, thank you, Dr. Ouellette.
Mr. Zimmerman, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not schools would even be able to reopen in the fall as normal. What kind of impact, obviously, do you see that happening, and do you see schools and businesses being open as kind of a joint tandem in order for folks that do work in these businesses to have some level of childcare?
Nick, you hit it spot on. I mean, they're intrinsically tied together, right? Because if we open the businesses up, but little Billy and Susie are still at home, it doesn't maybe help mom and dad if they can't necessarily find the appropriate childcare. So it is my belief, it would be I would advocate for kind of a harmonized approach to this. Look, I also consider the impact to our kids in this situation, right? So while some may say, hey, and as I drive through Hudson and River Falls, I've seen a lot of kids at the parks and playing in their yards, and that's great that they're doing that, and there may be some enjoyment. But the reality is that not all kids, not all families have equal access, for example, to online services. Once again, commend the educational centers for what they're doing, but what happens if you're in a home that doesn't have the access that somebody else does? You're now at a disadvantage. So, Nick, I believe that the approach we need to take must align not only our educational centers, but also align them with business, because, when they drop the kids off at school and mom and dad go to work, I think that that's a reasonable expectation. Not to mention, and I understand that generally the younger population are more, if you will, asymptomatic or carriers, not as likely to fall victim to some of the adverse things here. But this is something that I think has to be orchestrated in concert. So, here again, if we get to that table, that's going to be my argument there. One more thing that I just want to mention as it relates to education, and I'll maybe try and nip the elephant in the room. Nick, I know you well. I know this is on your mind. Not only from a educational perspective on the state budget going forward, but we've got a lot of other categories that are going to definitely need to be looked at carefully. This as a member of Joint Finance, there was once upon a time, many would call it the most revered committee to be on in the state. As I look forward, I don't know that I think that's true anymore. I think it's going to be one of the most challenging committees to serve on in the state of Wisconsin. But I want to just point out a couple things that historically have rang true in these moments. And I'm not picking favorites here, but here goes. When this recovery begins, and I hope that a lot of the analysts are correct, that it becomes a deep V. We went down fast and we come up fast. That's the hope, right? Not everybody's going to recover, okay? But that's our sincere hope. That as we do that we also recognize that there's going to be a lot of people in our workforce that need to retool themselves, that need to kind of adapt their skills. So extending from the Hudson Raider Works program at the high school level through the technical colleges all the way to our university programs here in the area, education generally sees a surge during a recessionary period or as it comes out of there. So I think we have to be very thoughtful, because the high class problem that we have in Hudson and St. Croix County coming into this was a workforce shortage. Everywhere I went, it was like, where can I get workers? And we need these. Well, hopefully the businesses, by way of participating in the payroll protection plan or in some other federal program, have been able to tread water long enough to see the sun dawn and come out the next day here as we open back up. But this is going to be a difficult budgetary period. I don't make mince words on that one at all. So it's going to take a lot of effort on all of our parts to come out of this successfully. But I found in this community, people are willing to roll their sleeves up and get involved and help, and I'm sure that's going to be needed.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? So do you see, there's some counties outside of St. Croix County that have just kind of decided to open up certain businesses or allow certain things to open? We get that question a lot. Is St. Croix County looking at that and so forth? So yeah. What's your take on that? Or it appears that it goes against the safer at home guidelines for some of these counties to go ahead and do that. And are they allowed to do that, or how does that work?
Well, that's a good question. And as your representative, I can never advocate for something that would go against public policy. So I'm not going to do that here. But I guess what I would say, Mary, to that question is, do I understand it? Yeah, I understand it. I'm not condoning or promoting it, but I understand it. Excuse me. I made a reference earlier to the other victims of COVID-19. These aren't the patients. These are some of the folks in, the town of Hudson, city of Hudson, River Falls, families that are struggling. I've never been too shy about, I grew up in a Western Wisconsin family where we didn't have much. And there was a period during my childhood where, I remember going to the refrigerator and seeing just the subsidized block cheese. Now, praise God, right? My journey would take me out of that. But, I also know what it's like, I guess, to literally be hungry. And so when I see people making those decisions, I've had local supper clubs, restaurants, businesses call me up and they're looking to me with almost their last in desperation for some level of assistance. And sometimes my office can help. We can help direct them through unemployment, because I know that in the state that's been a tough thing. The unemployment insurance or unemployment has been difficult to navigate. But for a lot of them, there's not much I can do. Other than just empathize and let them know that we are going to work diligently and relentlessly to come out of this. So the technical answer to your question is, we can't promote or condone it, but I understand it. And if I'm not Nostradamus here and I can't see the future, but what I would say is I think you're going to see more of it. And you're going to see more of it because people look around. I had to go to Menards this past weekend, right? I had to, finally, get in there and get some stuff for my list of chores, I guess, if you will. It's packed. And when people talk about science and how to approach this, right? And again, I'm a software engineer by trade, so I don't profess to be a healthcare expert, but here goes. If we want a scientific study to tell us, can we manage, the opening of businesses thoughtfully and safely, I say go to County Market, go to Menards or Home Depot, and the answer might be in front of you, and the answer is yes. Okay, we'll keep our distances, but We went to the Grocers Association, over 6,000 grocery stores in the state of Wisconsin, Mary. And the question was asked, have you seen a surge in COVID-19 cases because you're deemed essential and people need to eat, they go in there, they get their food? The answer was no. And that is a telling scientific research. These people are interacting and we're not seeing it. So once again, I'm not dismissing the validity that we have an issue to manage here, but I also believe we have a secondary issue that is now becoming a huge, huge thing that we have to get addressed right now.
Jolene.
Yes, my frustration, and I want some clarity, is these big box stores like Walmart, Menards, Target, all get to be open. And just kind of back to what you said, but like I live in River Falls, so there's a little Fox Den bookstore. She probably cleans her store better, never has more than 5 people in there at one time. She can't be open. But I walked into Walmart in Hudson, it was filthy.
Yeah.
So how is that? Why are we doing this?
I'd love to give you a politically correct answer, but I'm not going to. It's ridiculous is the answer. The selective nature, and I'm not here casting judgment. This is an example. And actually, Fox Den Books, I've had this conversation a number of times about that store in particular, why people use that as the example, but it seems to be a popular one.
Because she's sweet.
But it's this selective, what appears to be random nature. And then you couple that with the fact that people walk into Walmart and there's people everywhere. And to your point, it's not near as clean, but yet they're not all falling victim. And then they're left scratching their head going, this doesn't make sense. So Jolene, look, this is why I want to get to the table. I am eager to have a thoughtful conversation with DHS and the governor's staff about this very issue, because they're going to come to joint finance at some point in time because we control the state's coffers there, and we're going to have conversations. But we have to think about this, because the reality is this, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, a Walmart has a greater capability to absorb financially these difficult times when compared to some of our fantastic downtown Hudson eateries and Fox Den Books in River Falls, wineries in River Falls, whatever the case may be. So these are the questions that we have to get answered here, and we have to negotiate very aggressively. Public sentiment is starting to materially rise. I mentioned earlier the number of contacts to my office. I will give you a look in, because technically it's open records. We're probably running now, after the most recent announcement, about an 85% to 15% ratio, 85% being 4 regional, thoughtful, immediate openings of business across the state of Wisconsin. And I understand that.
Right, thank you. Great question. Steve.
Working on my unmute there. One, I realize we've been very, very lucky in the insurance industry to have, one, been deemed essential through this, and 2, being of a business model that it's worked very well to be able to work remotely. And we've, with all of our locations, have been having all but one person remote, and then having one person kind of as an anchor in the office. We've got, and I'm getting some requests, feasibly we could actually bring everybody in-house and still be compliant. And we've got some employees that are very eager to get back, some that are, most are pretty flexible and are just kind of ready to go with the flow. But as we approach that, making decisions, and that motto through the WMC might help some of this, but wondering about both timing in where it is a voluntary decision and making the right decision, then also protocol recommendations on protocol. Do we, as employees, wear masks all day? Do we just wear masks if we're dealing with a client? Do we require clients to wear them? Does the employer provide the mask? Do the employees provide the mask? All those questions. Are there guidelines or that might help us in approaching that as we're doing it on kind of a voluntary basis?
Mr. Leach, good question. Okay, so let me tell you the essence behind what WMC did here. The whole purpose was take people from different business sectors. So because the different business sectors have different needs, different interactions with their customers, but the idea is get people to the table here so that as a body, we could start to shape the answers to the question that you raise. In terms of whether it's mandated or volunteered, that probably will be determined, and it probably will be determined based on your assessment, your risk level, right? Are you a minimum? Are you a moderate? Are you substantial? Now, when you go to Menards, you got to spend $1 to buy a mask if you didn't bring your own, okay? I would imagine that in some of those situations, that will be a business-by-business decision in terms of what they do. And I'm sure, like some of you, I've read articles that actually challenge and question the effectiveness of the mask. Look, I'm not here to debate that, but this is the point with news, that there's a lot of different versions of news. So I think that, Steve, what we're going to find is that there's going to be these assessments that get assigned. They'll be data-driven, and then there'll be a level of variability by business in terms of how they want to participate in this. One point I didn't make that I need to make sure that I get across here is this. The governor's order, the reason we went to lawsuit and forced this topic is because the governor's emergency order expires on May 12th. You know, we can see it. It's just a few days away. What that would have meant is that the legislature would have turned it would have been turned over to the legislature. We would have gone to work. And I will tell you the consensus, I can't speak for all my colleagues. I believe, my opinion, consensus among my colleagues is that we would start a regional and immediate plan for opening and so forth, probably orchestrated the way we did. What the governor did was, by way of rule, by way of DHS utilizing their ability, they issued a rule to extend the stay at home. Now, in theory, this could go on indefinitely. The challenge before the Supreme Court is our challenge of that rule and forcing it back into the legislature for discussion and collaboration. I think that's the right thing to do, because one would argue that the DHS secretary serves at the pleasure of the governor. Therefore, when the DHS secretary initiates a rule, it's just an extension of what the governor wants. Humbly, regardless of your partisan views, no one human being should have that much authority and power over 6 million people in the state of Wisconsin. And that's the purpose of this representative republic that we live in, right? I represent roughly 60,000 people. I'm talking to you today. I'm hearing some feedback. Many of you have contacted my office, or some of you I know have called my cell phone. That's okay. I'm getting that feedback and using that information. So our hope there is that we're able to do that effectively and get back so that we can shape this. But I just want to clarify that point, because you're going to be hearing about that in the coming days on the news. What else?
Heather, are you talking to us?
No, my husband, who just made a cameo in his underwear. So hopefully you're watching Shannon and not me about 30 seconds ago. Thanks.
Is that Zoom bound that I was worried about? Oh, boy.
You know, being a trauma specialist later on.
I will need one, too. Councilmember DeZiel.
Yeah, thanks, Representative Zimmerman, for being here this morning. I guess my only question is, and first of all, I empathize with you, because this is a really tough position that all of us are in, and you as a representative, so I appreciate your thoughtfulness in trying to figure this out. My only question is, as we get into sort of lifting restrictions and regional guidelines and reopening, in a sense, how much flexibility is there with using the metrics if we've got to change course and clamp down again? So the reason I'm asking it is because in 1918 with the Spanish flu, where H1N1, the fall version was actually much more deadly than the spring version. Yeah. So there's a lot of studies saying we're talking about 12 months to 18 months to 2 years. I'm not trying to be the pessimist here. I'm just sort of saying, how do you do that in a way that if it's not going well, how do you kind of put the cat back in the bag?
Yep. That's a really good question, because we all want that crystal ball, and we'd love to be able to see with absolution and certainty the road ahead, which we can't do. The model, for example, that I will share or has been shared, I know, from WMC, utilizes that data-driven approach. So first of all, when we first encountered this situation, there was no playbook per se. We didn't really have a great plan in place, and frankly, that's on us all. So there again, I'm going to make lemonade from the lemon and say, you know, this won't happen to us again, I suspect, in terms of maybe readiness and thoughtful preparation. So it would be my belief that now implementing a more specific, configurable, data from each of the respective major areas, again, infection rates, the population densities, that should we suddenly see a surge, and I want to make sure that this again is opinion, so bear with me here. I sometimes wonder if we're tracking all the right metrics, or the media is promoting the right metrics. So cases, okay, that's a real metric, but I think we're going to see it go up. I think we'll see it move and go up and down. But I'm not sure that's a bad thing, because I talk to a lot of healthcare professionals regionally that look me in the eye and say, our human bodies are built to defeat this virus. Most of us, 99% of us, right? That's not all. So I think that we're going to see some cases increase. The measurement and the metric may be, and this will be determined by smarter people than me, is it those that require hospitalization, meaning there's more advanced medical issues in place. Deaths, we don't want deaths, right? We want to avoid those at all costs. So I guess the short answer to your question, I think, is that if we came into this without a good data-driven plan to drive our actions, now we're implementing, or we're conceiving of that plan. Let's get it implemented. And if the data tells us something different, it's kind of like a manufacturing line, right? We're measuring all the speeds and feeds as we're producing product. And if suddenly we're seeing changes or variations, we need to adjust somehow in the line. And that's exactly what I think would happen in that case. A concern that I do have, and maybe some of you share it, maybe you don't. I understand all the reasons that the federal government has taken the action that it has in terms of the substantial amount of funding. I get it, because the theory goes, let's inject monies to keep people paddling in a float, with the idea that we're going to flatten the curve, we'll get out in front of this, and the deep V comes and goes. But the reality that I hear from a lot of people I talk to when I run into them at the store is our debt. I have 4 grandchildren, and I don't know that they'll see in their lifetime our ability to pay this debt off. Now, that can't drive everything, but what I will say to this is that the state of Wisconsin's budget is different than the federal government. We're required by law to run to the good. The federal government doesn't have to. We've got to be designing a way to allow thoughtful opening here, because that's the way government gets its money, right? Sales tax, income tax, those sort of things. And so I think we can find the balance, and I think we can do so with stopping some of the bleeding, if you will, that's happened financially, because that's a serious, serious thing. At some point, I mean, I don't know how many economists we have on the call here, but I've run business and ran a public company, and I know this. At some point, foreign nations they're not going to buy our debt anymore. And then the dollar is going to get devalued, and then we have a whole set of other issues. So we just need to make sure that we are balancing public safety, healthcare of our great residents, with also the other implications. And it hasn't been covered in this call, but I want to make sure I share this. Mental health is a real thing. Mental crisis is a real thing. And I think we have evolved as a society that it recognizes it as, just as we do a physical injury or a physical challenge or something of that nature. And I just want to make sure that we also don't lose sight of the fact that take the time to call your friends, call your parents, your grandparents, check in with the elderly, because this, although some would say by comparison to foreign wars and great challenges that this nation has faced, let's not forget the implications of people being, held up in their home for weeks and months now. It's a real thing that we have to look out for as well. So I just wanted to inject that. Apologies.
All right, we'll take one last question if there is one. Seeing no hands raised. All right, please join me in thanking Representative Zimmerman for his time this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was awesome. Very good.
And thank you to you and Angel for the fabulous business that you run too. And we look forward to that being open and running so that we can partake in some wonderful beverages of choice.
You and me both.
Okay. So just before we end, I want to make you aware that on the Chamber website and what Representative Zimmerman sends me today, we will add to our COVID-19 resource page. That is on the Chamber website. That is updated with ongoing information throughout the week. So please check that out for the latest updates on that. Also on there, we do list the restaurants that are available for carryout, to go, and curbside, as we try to support those businesses as we are able. Want to invite you to Thursday to our second legislative update of this week, where we welcome Senator Patty Schockner, and that will be held at 9 a.m. So bring your cup of coffee, and look forward to seeing you there. And then a special invite for Thursday, May 14th, where we are going to host a Good Morning Hudson program. And bring your lunch. It's going to be on the 14th at 11:30. And I am thrilled to welcome back Chris Wright. He is the CEO of Minnesota United, the soccer group, and talking about our why, and has our why changed in the last 6 weeks. Excuse me, and learning about how a whole league pivots and changes, just like we are all learning to pivot and change at this time. So again, thank you to, excuse me, I need more, one moment. This is water, just so you know. Excuse me. Again, thank you for all of you, all that you are doing to keep Hudson safe during this time, and how we are all learning to do things a little bit differently. And thank you for your support of the Hudson Chamber. Thank you to Representative Zimmerman. We appreciate his time this morning. And to all of you, make it a great day. And I look forward to seeing you on Thursday morning. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mary. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.